Boldwood presents Better Days on Dressmakers Alley, written by Rosie Clarke and read by Gemma Lawrence. Chapter 1. April 1926, London. Lady Diane Cooper sat propped up against a pile of comfortable pillows, her breakfast tray to one side as she studied her latest creation, a suit for the Miss Susie range in a midnight blue serge. The jacket had long sleeves with tight button cuffs at the wrists and a fitted waist, the buttons brass-edged but with a padded centre to match the suit. The skirt was tapered to mid-calf and had a little V of pleats at the back that looked rather like a fishtail. It just allowed for walking rather than hobbling, as had been the fashion for a while a few years previously. Hearing a knock at the door, she looked up as she called out, "Enter!" thinking it was Meg, her personal maid, come to retrieve her breakfast tray. A smile touched her lips as her tall, handsome and distinguished husband entered. "Dearest Henry," she said, offering her hand. "When did you get back, my love? I didn't expect you until later this morning." "I decided to travel early. The traffic can be a nuisance if one leaves it until later in the day, so I thought we'd come early. Matthew wanted to drive, so all I had to do was sit back and watch the world go by, and think of you, my darling. Are you over that nasty chill now?" "Yes, I am quite well now, Henry." Lord Henry smiled and sat beside her on the bed. He picked up the drawings and nodded his approval. "I like that a lot, Diane. How is your little business doing now, my love? Not bored with it yet?" "Oh, no. You know how I have always loved clothes," she said, looking at him with the affection of a younger wife for an older husband. Lord Henry spoiled his young and beautiful second wife. He had a son, Matthew, by his first wife, and Diane had given him a daughter. Henry had no desire to increase his family further, because Diane had almost died giving birth to Marie, their adored child, who, at 3 years and 7 months, was the darling of his heart. He liked nothing better than to spend an hour in the nursery each morning, giving her rides on her rocking horse and playing soldiers with her. Marie Cooper had shown from an early age that she wasn't interested in the beautiful French fashion dolls her parents had bought for her, despite their china heads and their blue glass eyes and pouting mouths. She wanted her rocking horse and her toy soldiers, which had been Matthew's and his father's before him. She and Lord Henry could quite often be found on the nursery floor, lining up their battalions for a battle. "Have you been up to see Marie yet? She was asking when Daddy would be home," Lady Diane said. "Nanny thought she might be going down with a cold, but I understand she has thrown it off. Nanny says she has never known such a healthy child, and she certainly has a good pair of lungs. I could hear her screaming yesterday in my sitting room. Nanny says she has a temper on her, Henry." "I fear she must have inherited that from my father," Lord Henry replied, looking rueful. "She cannot have it from you, Diane. You never get angry, and, if I had a temper when young, I have learned to control it." "Yes, dearest," Diane agreed, lifting her cheek for his kiss. She smiled inwardly, for although he rarely showed temper towards her, he could be a little irascible if something in the morning papers annoyed him. "Matthew rarely shows his temper, but I dare say he has one." "Oh, I dare say," her loving husband agreed. He picked up her hand, kissing the fingers. "What have you planned for today, my love?" "I thought we would have a nice lunch together, but I have left the day free so that we might enjoy each other's company." "You don't need to work or have a meeting with Susie?" "No, Susie isn't coming today. She's extremely busy at the workshop. She has a large order to get out for Harper's. They are still one of our biggest customers, Henry, even though we are now selling our Miss Susie lines into good fashion shops up and down the country. She was telling me yesterday that she may have to take on more seamstresses, especially if the Miss Diane range starts to sell equally well. That held its own in its first season, but she is hoping for some growth this summer and autumn." Lord Henry arched an eyebrow and tried to look pleased. Lady Diane hid her smile. Her doting husband had indulged her in a whim, as he'd thought, believing she would soon become bored with designing clothes for sale to the younger modern woman. He'd assumed that she would grow tired of the business aspect and return to designing her own fabulous evening gowns and the occasional dress for one of her society friends. Even though he'd approved her first business plan and helped provide the finance for her to start the small fashion house, which was situated in Dressmakers Alley in the East End of London, he hadn't expected it to last. Rosie Collins, her friend and one-time dresser, had taken on the day-to-day running of the business for Lady Diane, and she had, against the odds, made a really good job of it. It was in large part due to Diane's talent in designing beautiful clothes, but, as a businessman of many years, Lord Henry knew that that alone could not have guaranteed success. Susie had made it work for Lady Diane. Rather too well, in Lord Henry's opinion, because he had nurtured hopes that it would be a short-lived thing, and his wife would once again be free to be the darling of society that he adored. "Naturally, I am pleased your venture is doing well," he told her now. "But promise me you will not let it take over your life, Diane. I know that business can, if you let it, occupy your every waking thought. And I want my wife to enjoy the good things of life and be able to come with me to Paris or Rome or a visit to friends in the country. Of course, I shall not allow it to intrude into our lives," Lady Diane promised him with a smile. "I love my life, Henry. I enjoy being spoiled, and I am ready to go anywhere you wish now that I am feeling better. After all, it is Susie who does most of the work. She and the girls who actually make the garments I design. Susie says they have plenty of new designs in hand, so I am all yours for the summer, Henry dearest. If you would like to spend some of it at a villa in Tuscany, there is no reason in the world why we should not." For Diane, it truly made no difference where she was, because there were always a few quiet hours when she could rest on her bed and create her beautiful designs. She often worked when everyone thought her resting or enjoying a leisurely breakfast. Lord Henry smiled and kissed her hand. "You were very fortunate that Susie was able to step in, Diane. You could not have done it without her. I hope you pay her sufficiently." "Susie has her wage, far more than she ever earned as a personal dresser, but I have also arranged for her to have a percentage of the profits." Lord Henry looked surprised. "Are you actually in profit, Diane?" "Matthew says we shall be by the end of the year, quite a lot, if his predictions are correct. We ought to have been last year, but a large order was cancelled at short notice. A shop had failed and the owner couldn't pay, so that stock remained on the racks. Susie has hopes that some of it will sell as reorders, but a few of the expensive evening gowns might not." "That is a shame. They cost you more to make up." Lord Henry grimaced. "Yes, they do. I could sell them off cheaply and recover the cost of the materials, but I think that is a bad policy. To reduce the price of stock creates a precedent, and the expensive gowns need to remain exclusive, don't you think?" "I leave such decisions to you and Miss Collins," her husband replied. "Well, I must visit our daughter, because I think she has just woken." They both heard loud screaming and indignant yells coming from the nursery wing. "I shall see you at luncheon, my dearest. I must go. Something tells me Marie knows I am in the house. Poor Nanny." "Poor Nanny, indeed," Diane said with a tinkling laugh. "Though I think Miss Marie may find Nanny has a heavy hand when it comes to smacking." "Oh, I have forbidden her to smack her," Lord Henry replied. "If there is punishment needed, I will administer it." Lady Diane frowned slightly as her husband left her. It was all very well to say that he would administer punishment, but she knew he didn't believe in smacking, perhaps because he'd endured rather too much of it as a lively youngster from a tutor who made too much use of a cane. Diane's own nanny had been very handy with the smacks when she was little, and many was the time she hadn't been able to sit comfortably for a day or two. It had taught her discipline. Diane was a little afraid that Marie would grow up without enough proper discipline. She was in danger of being thoroughly spoiled, and that was not truly a good thing. Marie had a lovely nature, but her father couldn't say no to her, and Nanny was getting older. If they were not careful, the child would run rings round her as she grew. It might be time to get a strict nurse in to help Nanny with her duties, though if Lord Henry refused to have his daughter chastised, they would still have their work cut out to teach her manners. A short, sharp tap at the time was far better than a lecture from her beloved father later. Shaking her head, Lady Diane reached for her bell and rang it. She threw the bed covers back and sat on the edge of the bed. When she was dressed and ready, she would visit the nursery and take her daughter out into the extensive gardens at the rear of the house. It was very pleasant at the moment, with hyacinths, early tulips and daffodils that lingered on. Diane would have to do whatever she could to reverse her husband's policy of Marie can do no wrong. It was perfectly understandable that he should be besotted with his beautiful daughter, but Lady Diane did not intend that she should grow up to be rude and selfish. That would not do at all. Nanny might not be allowed to smack, but her mother most certainly could and would. Chapter 2. How are we doing? Susie Collins asked her head seamstress, Yvonne. The sun was streaming into the workrooms from the large windows, making it a pleasant place to work. Shall we get the order out for Harper's by this evening? Yes, I'm sure we shall, Yvonne said, and smiled as Susie looked relieved. I've asked Winnie, Betty, the new girl Shirley, and Rita to work through their lunch hour. They will spend that time in the packing room and then return to their workstations when the other girls get back. All the packers are working through as well. We should deliver by 5 this evening. Good. Susie nodded, looking thoughtful. I'm not sure how we got behind. Winnie kept taking new orders, and for some reason they piled up, and suddenly there was a rush to get this one done. Winnie was Susie's sister-in-law and worked in the reception for them. She sometimes worked overtime as a seamstress, which was very useful when they had rush orders on, and Betty was their overseer. We need another 2 seamstresses, Yvonne told Susie. I think you need another packer as well, though I know she will probably seem to be surplus to requirements, other than when we have a rush on. I'm interviewing 2 girls as potential seamstresses later today, Susie replied, frowning a little now. You would think with all the applicants we'd had lately that it would be easy to fill the vacancies, but so many of them just aren't up to our standards. Yvonne nodded. I know. We do expect the best work, as we should. I wonder. There are small jobs that my best seamstresses are wasted doing. Fetching, carrying, various things. You turned that girl Janice down the other day, but she could have helped with fetching the cut-out garments, taking them through to the packing room, and with a bit of patience, I could get her sewing straight seams. I could train her when we haven't much on. Yvonne looked thoughtful. She seemed a nice, helpful girl, the sort we need to do whatever we ask, and I think she was desperate for a job. Susie stared at her. You are suggesting that if a girl's work isn't quite up to standard, we could use her in various ways to help out when we are rushed? If we had another good seamstress, and one that needs to improve, she could stand in with packing and fetching materials. That would keep the best girls working more efficiently. That might be useful, Susie said, her frown clearing. I will see who turns up today at the interviews and bear your suggestions in mind. She nodded. I have Janice's details, and if no one better turns up, I will ask her to come in for a second interview. Susie smiled and walked back to her office. Taking on 2 highly trained seamstresses would add considerably to the wage bill, and perhaps mean they wouldn't be in profit by the end of the year, as Matthew had predicted, and Susie didn't wish to disappoint Lady Diane. Although she knew that money wasn't all important to her wealthy employer, she also appreciated that Lady Diane would like to turn a profit so that she could show her husband she truly could make her business pay and it wasn't just an amusement. Susie had doubted her own ability to run a dressmaking business at the beginning. She'd been a complete novice, learning every step of the way, and for a while she had feared she would fail. There was so much more to it than Lady Diane dreamed when she'd spoken of wanting to create beautiful clothes for young women who could not afford designer garments. The designing was actually the easy bit. Lady Diane had talent, and the beautiful models just flowed from the end of her pens and pencils. It was Susie who put them together and made the delightful drawings into garments, with a lot of help from Yvonne. Susie had always made clothes and altered some for Lady Diane, who had been used to buying expensive models from exclusive fashion houses. Therefore, she knew how a good garment was structured and put together, and Yvonne was not just a seamstress. She had skills that exceeded Susie's own. Together, they had made Lady Diane's dream work. Betty, who oversaw the seamstresses at their workstations, checking on quality and making sure the girls didn't dawdle, was also a useful member of their little team. At first, Betty had been resentful of the posh employers who had taken over from the man she had both loved and hated, Bert Barrow, the previous owner of the workshop, who had met an untimely end at his half-brother's hands, a wicked criminal who had used unfortunate girls for his own purposes. All that was over, water under the bridge, and Betty was now one of the hard-working and happy band of young women who produced fabulous clothes at reasonable prices. Susie could hardly believe how her own life had changed. Not much more than 3 years ago, she had been Lady Diane's dresser and content in her work. Looking back, she realised how restricted her life had been in service. As a dresser, she had been a privileged servant, but still a servant, and tied to her job for more hours than she cared to remember. Her time was rarely her own, and she'd had no private life. And although Lady Diane was an indulgent mistress, the butler, who ruled the household, did not encourage the female staff to have romantic relationships. Susie no longer lived in as a servant. She'd found herself a tiny apartment in part of a large Georgian house, overlooking the River Thames, her view one of fast-flowing water and riverside buildings, rather than the back streets and rooftops of the East End. She'd been lucky to get it, but of course it belonged to Lord Henry, a part of his property empire. It had 1 bedroom, a sitting room and a kitchenette. She had the smallest of bathrooms, which had clearly been squeezed into what would have been a box room or child's room, but it was adequate, and she took pride in keeping it all spotless. Her room remained open for her use at the house in Hanover Square. It suited Lady Diane that Susie should be able to stay if she was required for any reason, and on rare occasions, if Meg, her ladyship's new dresser, was ill or it was a very important function, Susie would still assist her ladyship to dress. Susie no longer felt like a servant. When she helped out at Hanover Square, it was as a friend, and because she wished it, and because, like everyone else, she adored Miss Marie Cooper. Susie sat down at her office desk and looked at the spreadsheet before her. It was of Mr. Matthew's creation and showed her exactly how much material she had bought, how much had been used, and how much ought to be left, if any. However, her mind was not on her work at that moment. It had strayed to the evening ahead. She had been invited to a meal at the home of Timothy Marsh's uncle Sir Hugo, and she was nervous, though there was not the least reason why she should be. Timothy was the young and thrusting lawyer who had represented her brother Sam when he was wrongly arrested for a murder he had not committed. At the time, it had seemed that Sam's hammer had been used for the crime, which was circumstantial evidence, but enough for the police to throw him in the cells. Sir Hugo Marsh, Lady Diane's own lawyer, had been ill in hospital. He'd had a burst appendix, which had been quite worrying as the operation could have gone either way. However, he had come through and was now as robust as ever, and he wanted to meet the young woman his nephew had been taking out, whenever he had had time this past 1.5 years. "Are you serious, my boy?" Sir Hugo had asked Timothy. Susie wasn't sure what her friend had replied, because he hadn't told her, but it had resulted in an invitation, or, to be precise, a command to bring her to dinner one evening soon. But why? Susie asked Timothy when he'd taken her to tea at the Savoy and told her of the summons to his rich uncle's home. Does he know? Did you tell him? That we were lovers? Timothy had reached for her hand across the table, raising it to his lips to kiss the tips of her fingers. He wouldn't understand, my dearest. He would demand that I either marry you or give you up, and you would be damned as a fallen woman in his eyes. Do you think he would wish me to be a guest in his house if he was aware? Susie had asked, looking at him doubtfully. I feel that we are deceiving him, Tim. Then marry me, Timothy had replied promptly. This situation is of your making, Susie, not mine. Yes, I know, she'd agreed, because he had asked her to marry him soon after they'd started seeing one another regularly. Susie had refused, not because she didn't care for him. She did, more than she ever had for any man other than her brother, and that, of course, was in a different way. I gave you my reasons, Tim. First of all, I have an important job to do and a promise to keep for Lady Diane. And secondly, her second reason for turning down his proposal was less clear, yet important to her. All my life, I have been at the beck and call of someone. In service, your life is never your own. And now, for the first time, I have the freedom to do exactly as I please. I do care for you, Tim. I think I love you, but I value my independence, at least for a while. Timothy had looked at her for a long moment, then inclined his head. So what do we do, Susie? I want you, and I think you feel the same. Yes, I do, Susie had told him, smiling. Can I not have both? A relationship with you and my independence? You mean, become my mistress? He'd asked doubtfully. I don't like that word, Susie had countered. Why can't we just be lovers? Timothy had paused for a long moment, gazing into her eyes, and then he'd smiled. Yes, we can, my darling, but there is one condition. Susie's brows had arched at that, but his next words brought a reluctant laugh and nod. If you fall for a child, we marry before it becomes obvious. Yes, that's fair, she'd agreed, her fingers entwining with his. I couldn't continue my life as an unmarried mother. But are you sure you wish to marry me, Tim? In time. Why wouldn't I? I adore you. You must know that. His eyes sought hers, and she'd inclined her head. Good, that is fair enough then. I understand you want some freedom for a while, and I love you enough not to make unreasonable demands. They had become lovers soon after. Susie didn't see Timothy every night. He was busy with clients and travelled a lot to other parts of the country. He'd spent some time in France helping the young but banished scion of a noble family. Had they been married, Susie would have been in his home and there when he came back from his travels. But as it was, they met when it suited them both, sometimes for tea and then spending the whole evening in bed together. So far, there had been no alteration in Susie's monthly cycle. She believed it was possibly her age. She was in her mid-30s, actually 2 years older than Timothy. Perhaps she was too old to have a child. So many girls were young, less than 20 years when they married and started a family. Or perhaps Susie was one of those women who just could not have a child. A part of Susie regretted that deeply. She enjoyed her life at the workshop and her independence, but in the past, she had often longed for a child to love, but never expected it to happen. In service, and seldom meeting anyone that might have stirred her interest, she had expected to live out her days as Lady Diane's dresser. Now her life was so much fuller. She worked hard, but she had time for play. Sometimes she went to the theatre with her brother's wife. Winnie loved to go out, and Sam often worked late at his little cobbler's shop. He helped to keep his mother as well as his wife, though Winnie was earning too. She worked in the reception at Miss Susie, taking orders and helping out where needed when they were busy. However, that was due to end soon, at least for a while, because Winnie was pregnant with her first child. Susie had shared Winnie's excitement when she discovered it and felt glad for them both. Sam looked so proud and was working harder than ever so that his son, he was certain it was a boy, though he would love a girl just as much, should have a proper education and a lot of things that neither his father nor his mother had enjoyed when young. Winnie's life had been even harder than Sam's by the sound of what she'd told him, and they were both determined their child should have a better start in life. Susie contributed the largest share towards her mother's comfort. Her wages were more than double what she'd earned as a dresser, and once the business was in profit, there would be more. Susie wasn't sure what she needed more for, unless she got herself a bigger apartment. At the moment, she was happy living the way she did. Shaking off her reverie, she brought her mind back to the job in hand. For some reason, they had a lot of pale cream silk in stock. She frowned as she recalled that an expensive summer morning dress had not sold as well as expected last year. Her fingers drummed on the desk in front of her, and then she nodded and smiled. They could make up some pretty blouses for the cheaper Miss Yvonne range. Sometimes it outsold both the Miss Susie and the Miss Diane ranges, and that was down to Yvonne's son John, who had a budding talent as a dress designer, though he was still at school. Yvonne said he'd become quite keen on the idea and was coming up with a lot of sketches that she hadn't yet had time to make up into preliminary garments to show Susie. Susie would ask Yvonne to get him to design a couple of blouses that would use the silk and would probably bring them into profit. "One of the seamstresses has gone home sick," Yvonne said, poking her head round the door. "I don't like to ask, Susie, but could you take her station? With the best will in the world, I can't do two persons' work, and Winnie had a doctor's appointment." "I will for an hour or so, then I have those interviews. Winnie can take over for me when she gets back from her doctor's visit." Susie smiled at her and followed her through into the workshop. Chapter 3. Winnie came out of the doctor's surgery feeling relieved. She'd been getting pains in her back, ankles and legs, and was worried that something was wrong. In the early months of her first pregnancy, she was anxious that it should all go well. Sam was so excited that they were having a child and was working all hours to provide everything she needed for the baby and herself. "We've got a bit put by," Sam had told her when they had talked about the consequences of her having a child. "You'll want time off when the baby is born, Winnie. I know you love your job. I am sure Susie will keep it open for you for a while." He smiled at her lovingly. "You might decide that you don't want to work once the baby is here." "I do enjoy working at Miss Susie," Winnie had replied. "I should like a few months off, but once the baby is weaned, I don't need to be at home all the time. I can go in for a few hours a day, and then when he starts school, I can go full-time again if I choose. Susie says she likes having me there, and she will always find a job for me, either in reception as now, at a workstation or in the packing room. There's plenty of choice." "Well, you help out wherever they need it, don't you?" Winnie had nodded, and Sam had reached over and kissed her. "You'll do whatever you want, dearest. I love you, and I just want you to be happy." "I am happy," Winnie told him. "Our troubles are behind us, Sam. We were both unfairly arrested, but Susie found a good lawyer for us. Now we're married. I have a good job and you have a good business. We're lucky. Now that Susie is earning a lot more, she pays most of your mum's expenses anyway." "Exactly, so you don't have to work, unless you want to." "I think I'd be bored staying at home all the time," Winnie had confided, and he'd nodded his understanding. They had a good marriage. Sam supported Winnie's work with the women's movement, his only proviso that she didn't do anything to get arrested for. Winnie had agreed, and these days she stuck to helping out in the office when she had time and going to the meetings, but she was staying clear of the demonstrations. Not that there had been many just recently, though some of the women had protested about the way the miners had been treated. Locked out of the mines and refused the right to work because they wouldn't accept the lower wages and harsh conditions the mine owners imposed, Winnie had complained to Sam after one meeting. Can you believe anyone could be so cruel? The men who sit in Parliament have never experienced want or hunger, Sam replied, frowning. If they had, they would have more sympathy for a group of men who just want a fair wage and decent working conditions. I'd like to put some of those MPs down the mines and see how they get on, Winnie had declared with a militant light in her eye. Sam had laughed. They would jolly soon beg to be brought back up, even if you could get them down in the first place, he'd said, highly amused at the idea. Now, I don't mind you going to your meetings and supporting the miners, but please don't get yourself worked up, my love. You are carrying a very precious baby. Of course, Winnie had promised she wouldn't, and she'd managed to put the political turmoil out of her mind, determined to keep calm as she prepared to carry her child full term. Nothing must happen to the baby, because they were both looking forward to it so much. Winnie was reassured by the doctor's soothing words after he'd examined her. Nothing wrong as far as I can tell, he'd told her. Some women make nothing of it, while others have lots of aches and pains, Mrs. Collins. It looks as if you belong to the second group. I can't tell you that you will have an easy time of it, but I think everything is as it should be. Perhaps you could have a lie down after lunch every day. I'm a receptionist in a busy workplace, Winnie had told him. I need to be at my desk most of the day. Then you need to get up and move about more, he'd replied. I know you young women like to work, and some of you have no choice, but it may be the cause of your swollen ankles. More exercise is what you need, young lady. Get up and walk about as much as you can. Winnie thought about it on her way back to work. She would talk to her mother-in-law about the doctor's advice and see what she had to say. Your mum says I should ask one of the other girls to change places with me for an hour or so, Winnie told Sam when he got home and asked her how the doctor's visit had gone. If I worked in the packing department for a while, it would keep me moving. Perhaps an hour in the morning and the same in the afternoon. Speak to Susie about it, Sam said. She fills in wherever there is a need, so she would take over your job and let you pack for a while if you ask. Yes, I expect so, Winnie agreed. I will ask her tomorrow. But I can get up and walk about the reception area, if that is what I need to do. I never even thought about it, but your mum agrees with the doctor, so I'll bow to their judgment. Mum knows a thing or two, Sam said, smiling across at his mother, who was darning one of his socks. If you feel you'd be better at home, Winnie, you know you can take time off, whenever you like. I shan't let Susie down, Winnie said with a little shake of her head. If I begin to feel it's too tiring, I'll warn her so she can find someone else. But I'm not ready to give up yet, Sam. Do what you feel best, Sam replied, smiling at her. All I want is for you to be well, Winnie. He kissed her hand, holding it tightly. You are the most important, my love. Yes, I want a baby, but not at the expense of losing you. If anything makes you frightened or anxious, go back to that doctor and ask him to examine you again. I love you, Winnie. I know, she said, and smiled at him. I'm going to get our supper now, and don't say you will, Sam. Remember, the doctor says I sit down too much and need the exercise. Sam laughed. I shan't stop you, my love. I doubt you'd listen if I tried. Don't be daft, Sam, his mother chided. Winnie always consults you before she makes an important decision. She is a proper wife, not like some of those society ladies you read about in the newspaper. That Miss Fairley, as was. She's some lady or other these days, but she's been seen in a place that no decent woman would go. She lowered her voice. It's a den of iniquity, that's what it is. They call it a women's club, but everyone knows only ladies who like ladies and hate men go there. You mean lesbians? Sam looked at her in amusement. It wouldn't suit me to be married to one of them. But if unmarried lassies want to carry on together, well, what's so wrong in that? He shrugged his shoulders. Sam! His mother and wife chided him together. It's not quite nice, his mother said. We don't talk about things like that, dear. Sam might have pointed out that his mother had begun it, but held his peace. It really didn't bother him one way or the other. All he cared about was providing a decent living for his family. Lady Diane has asked me to make her some fine lingerie, Winnie said. I am to go to tea one Saturday and discuss what she wants. That will be nice for you, Winnie, her mother-in-law said and smiled at her. You like going there, don't you? I was very nervous the first time, Winnie admitted. Now I look forward to it. Her cook makes marvellous little sandwiches and cakes. I know. You brought me some back the last time she asked you to make something for her. I wonder she doesn't have her things made at the workshop. They don't have time, Winnie told her. We're rushed off our feet sometimes, Mum. There will be days when we haven't got much to do, but mostly we're working like fiends to get the orders out, taking shifts and doing overtime. This latest collection of Miss Yvonne was so popular. It is a bit cheaper than the Miss Susie range, but just as stylish. Well, that is good to know, Mrs. Collins replied with a smile. You won't lose your job there then, Winnie. Oh, no. Susie always looks after me, Winnie said with a fond look at her husband. I'm sure some of the girls are jealous. There's one called Millicent, or Millie. She's a real bitch. She's hinted at things a few times, but never out loud. I dare say she would, if Susie wasn't my sister-in-law. Well, you'd give her as good back, said Sam, laughing. I dare say you could make mincemeat of her if you tried. Winnie laughed and nodded. I probably could, Sam, but some of the other girls might be a bit more vulnerable than me. Chapter 4. Lily looked up as her brother Joe Ross opened the door of her little flower shop and walked in, a big grin on his handsome face. Something nice happened? She asked him, smiling to see him looking happy. Yes, he replied. Your husband just did a cracking deal on some silver and a box full of rare porcelain, and my cut means that I can either buy a second-hand lorry or employ someone to develop a new coal round, or put a deposit on that house Sarah likes. Sarah was a nurse, and they'd been courting a couple of years. Her father was a judge and well off, which meant Joe couldn't ask Sarah to live in a tiny terraced house. It had to be a good detached house with a garden to merit her family's approval. So, which are you planning to do? Lily asked him, though she was fairly sure she knew. I'm going to ask Sarah if she will marry me, Joe said. If she says yes, then I shall put a deposit on the house. I can borrow the rest of the money, because Jeb insisted I got a bank account and put money in every week. Your clever husband told me that if I did that, the bank would give me a loan on the house. His face lit up with enthusiasm. Jeb is a canny one, all right, Lily. You struck lucky when you married him, girl. I hadn't a clue what that porcelain was, or its worth. I saw it in a box in the shed when I delivered some coal to a house I'd just started delivering to, and asked if they wanted to sell it. They said it had been left behind by previous tenants, and I could just take it out of the way. But I asked Jeb to have a look, and he gave them £5 for it. They were delighted. So was I when he told me that if he was right in his instincts, that porcelain could be worth a small fortune. He got £10 for the silver spoons and forks, but he got 150 for the porcelain. It was a complete dinner and tea service, Sevres as he called it, whatever that means. Jeb gave me half of everything, because, as he said, he wouldn't have known about it if I hadn't spotted it. Oh, Joe, that is such a lot of money, Lily said with a little sigh. If I'm lucky, I might take as much, or perhaps a bit more, in the shop for a week, but most of that is spent on rent, buying in the flowers, and paying for lighting and heating in the winter, and other bits and pieces. I take home around £5. I could take a bit more, but I keep afloat so I've got money for emergencies. Besides, that is a good wage for me, and I don't need more, so I save any surplus. Sometimes Jeb needs a bit of cash for his business. I let him look after the money, and he either uses or saves it for me. When I need a bit extra, he gives it to me. Joe's eyebrows rose. Not getting fed up with the shop, are you? I don't know why you continue to do it, Lily. Jeb could keep you easily. You don't have to work now, and you've got your little girl to look after. Lily smiled, pushing back her dark hair that curled naturally around her pretty face. Yes, that is what Jeb says, but Mum enjoys taking care of my little Sally 4 days a week. I only come in on those 4 days now. The shop is closed on Mondays, which was seldom worth opening for anyway, and on Saturdays I have Jessica. Lily smiled enthusiastically. She's a bright, clever girl. I do all my hotel arrangements when I'm in and make up a few posies, but Jessica can do the posies herself, and she sells a lot of flowers on Saturdays. The customers seem to love her. Jessica Brown was 15. She was the daughter of one of Lily's neighbours, but staying on at school to take her higher exams and go to college because she wanted to teach. The job in Lily's flower shop would only ever be a Saturday job for her, but she loved it and had a flair for it. Besides, the small wage she earned helped to buy her own clothes. Her mother was a widow and had struggled to give her daughter the education she deserved by taking in washing and ironing. Jessica helped her mother with the ironing after she'd done her homework at night. Mum doesn't wash on Saturdays, she told Lily when asking if she could have the little Saturday job. She doesn't like it hanging about over the weekend, and 4 days a week brings in just enough for us to manage. I used to do a paper round before school, but Mr. Jelly wanted the job for his son when he was ready to start. Lily liked Jessica and her mother, to whom she took her own sheets and towels on a Monday because it was easier for her to just wash their clothes. Mrs. Brown had a lovely big copper, which was built of brick, lined with a tub, and had a fireplace under it. She heated the water and let the sheets soak with soda crystals for 2 hours or so, then lifted the washing with wooden tongs into a bowl and rinsed them in the sink. Then she put it all through a heavy mangle and hung it up to dry in her large outhouse. It took all Lily's free time to wash her personal items, Jeb's and Sally's bits and pieces, so having someone in the street who took in washing was helpful. She would rather pay the 5 shillings to have her sheets and towels washed than have to stand over the boiler herself. Besides, on Monday afternoons, she went round to her mother's house and cleaned it from top to bottom. Mrs. Ross refused to have anyone else in, and her health wasn't good enough for her to do it. Lily's mum was better than she had been a few years back. She could cook and look after little Sally, but scrubbing and washing were beyond her. So Lily took her sheets and towels to Mrs. Brown as well, and paid the 5 shillings for them to be done. Jeb got annoyed about that, because he said Joe gave his mother plenty of housekeeping money so she could pay for her own washing. However, Mrs. Ross refused to pay for washing. When Lily told her she hadn't got time to do that as well as the housework, she'd said she would do it herself. Of course, she'd known Lily wouldn't allow that, but instead of meekly giving in and doing them herself, Lily had put her heels down and taken them to Jessica's mum. Mrs. Ross had sniffed and told her it was her choice. Sometimes Lily felt annoyed with her mother. She seemed to go out of her way to be awkward with Lily. Joe and her elder brother Ted could do no wrong, but Lily was often in trouble for no reason at all. However, Mrs. Ross doted on Sally and was as sweet and loving a grandmother as could be. "Did you hear what I said, Lily?" Joe's question broke through her reverie, and she blinked, looking at him blankly. "You said you were going to ask Sarah to marry you," Lily said, smiling at him. "I'm certain she will say yes, Joe. She loves you." "When you first started courting her, I didn't think it would work, because she's a different class from us. But she hasn't wavered, has she?" "No, she hasn't. And her parents accepted me right off. I didn't think they would. But her dad said I was an enterprising young chap with his own business and would no doubt make something of myself. Joe grinned. He said when I could buy Sarah a house she chose, he would give us his blessing. And now you can, Joe. That's lovely, Lily said. I'm so pleased. I knew you would be, Joe said, grinning from ear to ear. But you weren't listening just now. I asked if you and Jeb would like to come out for a fish and chip supper with Sarah and me. We ought to celebrate all together. We'll take Mum too. I reckon Winnie Collins would have your Sally if you asked her. Yes, I'm sure she would, Lily agreed. She said as much on several occasions. She's very excited about her baby. Can't wait. And Sam's mother is knitting like mad, making lots of baby clothes for her. That's settled then, Joe said. I'll book a table at the cafe for the 5 of us on Saturday night. They get very busy, so I'll ask Morris to keep us a table. That's Mr. Farrow, isn't it? Lily said. I didn't know his first name. Oh, we went to school together. We were both in the army cadets, but neither of us got in. He had flat feet, so even though he was a year older than me, they wouldn't take him. And I was too young until the war was over, and then I wasn't bothered, because I was building the coal rounds. Oh, I see. Lily looked fondly at her brother. Joe worked hard at 2 jobs, and he helped Jeb cart furniture when he was needed. He also kept an eye out for stuff folk had shoved in their sheds that might be worth something. Lily's husband bought and sold most things. He did house and shed clearances, and he had found a lot of good stuff over the years. He had a shop in the commercial road, selling second-hand furniture and bits and pieces, but he didn't sell the special stuff through his shop, because he said folks might get annoyed if they realised how much some of it was worth. If they are willing to throw it out or just give it away, and I give them £5 or £10 for it, they are better off. Some rag and bone man would just take it and not give them 2pence, Lily. I give them as much as I dare. I'm never 100% sure I'm right until I look stuff up when I get home, and then I have to find the right buyer, so I do a lot of extra work. Most of the stuff is just run-of-the-mill, but now and then... Jeb had looked pleased with himself. Well, I get lucky. Lily nodded. A part of her sometimes felt Jeb ought to go back and give the people he'd bought from a bit extra if things turned out to be worth a lot more than he'd paid, but Jeb said a deal was a deal. Besides, if I did that, they'd want to know how much I got and would probably create hell because I got too much for their liking. Folks are funny that way. If I am sure something is worth a lot, I do offer more, Lily love. But then sometimes they get suspicious and turn my offer down. Some of them would rather leave things in the shed to moulder than let me turn an honest penny, he'd continued. You're drifting off again, Joe said suddenly. What's up with you today, Lily? You've got your head in the clouds. Sorry, Joe, Lily apologised. You said you would fetch Mum at 7 on Saturday and meet us at the cafe. You were listening, Joe laughed, and then stopped as they heard a loud bang out in the alley. He rushed to the door and looked out. You stay there, Lily. There's been an accident. Joe went rushing outside. A baker's van had collided with a removal lorry and careered across the road, hitting a young woman. The drivers were out of their cabs, yelling and blaming each other. Joe went to the young woman, who was lying with her eyes closed, a gash on her forehead that was bleeding profusely. He took his handkerchief from his jacket pocket, thanking his lucky stars that he'd put a clean one in that morning. The girl was stirring, looking up at him in bewilderment as he wiped away the blood. I think it is just a superficial cut, Joe told her. Lie still, miss. You'll go dizzy if you try to get up. The girl gave a little sob of despair. I was about to cross the road and I didn't see what happened. I was heading for Miss Susie's. I have an interview this morning. She attempted to sit up and fell back against Joe as her senses swam. If I don't go, they will think I didn't bother, and I so much want to work there. They pay the best wages and... She swooned in Joe's arms. You should bring her inside, Lily said, having disobeyed Joe's orders to remain in her shop. "No, I'll take her to Miss Susie," Joe replied with a frown. "That's where she wants to go. They can send for a doctor, and I'll tell them she was coming for an interview when she got knocked down." "Let me make sure there are no broken bones first." Brother and sister looked at the man who had just spoken. He knelt down on the dirty pavement, uncaring of his smart pinstripe suit, and ran his hands gently over the girl's limbs, lifting her eyelids to look at her eyes. "I think she has just fainted. I will take her to Miss Susie. Give me a hand to lift her, please." He looked at Joe. "I'm not sure, but I think you're Joe Ross, Lily from the flower shop's brother." "Yes, sir, Mr. Matthew." Joe touched his coal-blackened cap respectfully. "I've seen you going into Miss Susie's a couple of times." Joe helped him lift the unconscious girl and settle her in his arms. Carrying her carefully, he strode off down the street, Joe dogging his footsteps as if he feared Mr. Matthew might drop her. Lily watched for a moment. Then she saw she was about to get a customer and ran back to her shop. "Nasty accident by the looks of it," the customer said, as Lily entered and smiled at him. "Not sure he should have picked her up. Best to call a doctor to her where she lay." "I don't think anything was broken," Lily said, slightly defensive. "Mr. Matthew checked. She was able to talk and tell us she was going for an interview. I think it is just a cut and a bang on the head." She smiled brightly. "What can I do for you, sir?" "I want a bunch of lily of the valley and one of those roses," the man said, nodding as he took out his wallet. "My wife loves lily of the valley, but I like to give her a rose every day." "How lovely," Lily said. "The lily of the valley smells nice, but the rose does too. I try to always get scented roses, but unfortunately, some of the ones grown these days don't seem to have as much scent as they used to." "This one does," her customer said. "I'm looking for someone. I don't suppose you know where Mr. Sam Collins has his shop, do you? I was told it was around here, but not in Dressmakers Alley." "You need to go to the other end of the alley, past the dressmaking business, and then turn to your right. It's down there." Lily smiled as she handed him his change. Lily thanked him for his custom and he left, just as one of the girls from Miss Susie came in. "Oh, Lily, I hope you've got more lily of the valley. It's me mum's birthday and I wanted to buy some for her." "Yes, I've got another 3 bunches, Lily said. "Are you in your lunch break, Rita?" "Yes, but I have to get straight back. Yvonne wants us all to work through today to get another rush order out. I'll be glad when Miss Collins finds another seamstress or 2. The extra money is lovely, but I just had to get these for Mum's birthday. You can only buy them for such a short time. I like to make sure she has some." She held the posy to her nose, inhaling the lovely perfume. "I bought her a pretty scarf and a lovely card, but she does love flowers." Lily nodded her agreement. "My mum does too. She scolds me for wasting my money, but she loves them just the same." Rita White nodded and smiled. "Mums say a lot of daft things, don't they? Mine says I should keep my money for myself, but I love her and I like buying her little presents. Besides, I'm earning overtime every week at the moment." "Lucky you," Lily said. "Joe just took a girl who was in the accident to Miss Susie's. He says she was going for an interview there and they can phone for a doctor. I haven't got my phone on here yet. Jeb wants me to have it, but they would only put me a party line on for the moment, so I said I'd leave my name on the list until I can have my own private line. I don't like the idea of someone else being able to listen to my conversations." "No, I shouldn't like that either," Rita agreed. "I must fly, or Yvonne will be cross." She put down her 3 shillings and ran with her precious posy. Lily went back to the door and looked out. A policeman had arrived now and was taking particulars from the drivers and bystanders in his little black notebook. Lily saw one of the other shopkeepers coming towards her. He grinned at her as he entered. "About time the cops got here. Those 2 were coming to blows when he blew his whistle." They blame each other, but it was the baker's fault. I saw him turn across in the path of that lorry, and he didn't signal. I've already told the copper. Oh dear, it is such a shame. That young girl might have been badly hurt. Lucky for her and the baker that she wasn't, or he'd have been in serious trouble, and he's got enough problems. His wife is having a baby, and she's ill a lot of the time, he said. He looked at Lily. I want some of that lily of the valley for my wife. How much are they? 3 shillings a bunch, and I've got 2 left. I'll have 'em both, he said, and put his hand in his pocket, bringing out 2 half-crowns and a shilling. There you are, Lily. My wife Maureen loves lily of the valley. Yes, a lot of folk do, Lily said. I had a dozen bunches fresh in this morning, and every one of them is sold. I probably shan't be able to get any more. They don't flower for long. Good business, he said. I've sold a few newspapers and a couple of packets of woodbines this morning. Oh, and a quarter of Tom Thumb drops. He grinned. Good thing I got a bit of a sideline going. He touched the side of his nose. My horse came in at 20 to 1 on Saturday. I had £1 on it. One more than I'd take in a couple of days. He went off chuckling to himself. Lily shook her head. Alf Roberts was a bit of a gambler. All very well when your horse won, but if he lost £1 or 2 most weeks, that couldn't help his profits. She was lucky Jeb wasn't a gambler. Well, in his own way, she supposed he was. Jeb did very well with most of his purchases, but now and then he got caught out. A picture he'd bought, believing it to be an oil painting, had turned out to be an oleograph fake, and he'd lost £10. Jeb had just shrugged it off. You win some, you lose some, he told her with a rueful look. Now you know why I don't give big prices, unless I'm certain of what I can get, Lily. And most of the time, I fly by the seat of my pants. Instinct. That's what I've got. And luck. Lily smiled and went through to the back to put her kettle on. She'd just made a mug of tea when her shop bell went. It was Joe again, and he was smiling. I thought I would let you know that girl is all right, he told her. She came round when the doctor arrived, and he says she just has a nasty bump on her head. Susie told her to come back another day, but she insisted on staying for her interview. Her name is Janice, and she'd been called back after being turned down the first time. Oh, poor girl, Lily said. I do hope she gets her job after all that. Joe nodded, looking thoughtful. Fancy Mr. Matthew knowing to do all that, he said. Told me he did a first aid course when he was in the army cadets for a while as a youth, and he says it has come in useful a few times. Yes, he seemed to know what he was doing. I think you have to be careful before you move someone after an accident. Well, he'd know things like that, being university educated, Joe mused. Pretty girl, wasn't she? Who? Oh, the girl who had the accident. Lily gave him a curious look. I thought you were going to ask Sarah to marry you. What? Yes, I am, Joe laughed. No, she wasn't my type, but Mr. Matthew seemed very taken with her. He shook his head. No, I expect he was just concerned. I'd better go and do some work. Not that I've got much on today. The deliveries are slow with domestic coal this time of year. I have some industrial coke to deliver this afternoon. What about your building work? Lily asked.